So the thing that I want to show you today is new Spring features, new Spring supported features in IntelliJ 15. You may know about the Spring Initializr, which is a wizard to create a skeleton project based on a set of dependencies, and it's integrated in the IDE since 40.1. I want to show you some new cool stuff that has been added in 15. As you may know, Spring Boot 1.3 is about to be released, and there's plenty of new features, and IntelliJ IDEA 15 already supports them. Mostly new metadata support, so about new features about configuration keys. IntelliJ IDEA 15 is also much smarter about the Spring model and gives you a better hint about the dependencies in your project and the candidates that you can use for injection points. 15 also introduced support for the YAML format alongside the properties format. And finally, you also see that when you create a new project using the wizard, plenty of stuff will be configured for you automatically. Okay, so let's get started. You probably know this website, right? That allows you to create very easily a new project. So you shop for dependencies and basically choose the Spring Boot version you want to use, the build system that you want to use. You can see all the options there. You can download that project. It's a zip file. Then you can unzip it, and you can integrate that in the IDE. Of course, these are manual steps that you have to do to get started, and it would be much better if you could do that right from your IDE without leaving it. So to do so, you can click on this Create New Project button and choose Spring Initializr. So that's not new; it's already there in 14.1. I'm just going to keep the default, right? I'm going to take the latest Spring Boot release. What's new in 15 is that you can search for dependencies, and it searches not only in the name of the dependency, but also in the description. You can also collapse items, and even though if you search for something that's collapsed, it will give you a hint that there are some items here which are available. So for the purpose of this simple application, we're not going to build an app. I'm going to choose web and actuator, right? So next, and let's call that test webinar IntelliJ 15. Okay. So when you do that, there's many things that are happening. You can see that the project got automatically imported, so you can just start coding. A default run configuration was also created. So basically, you can just run and your app is basically starting. There is also, if you go into project structure, if you look into facets, you can see that a Spring related facet. Okay, sorry. Right. So basically everything is configured for you. You can just start writing actually the business logic for your application. So the first thing I want to show you is, well, you all know probably, if you're using Spring Boot and IntelliJ, you probably all know already the content assistance for configuration key. So basically you type a few keystroke corresponding to a key that you're searching and you get content assistance. You get also default value, documentation, links to the code. So there's plenty of things that you get out of the box. But in 15 and in Spring Boot 1.3, we've added more feature to it. And the first thing is deprecated support. So I know that there is a key called spring.mvc.prefix, which is used to configure the MVC prefix for the app. And in 1.3, we actually discovered that the namespace of that key was wrong. So we rename it to something else. So if I search for Spring MVC prefix, you can see that the new one appears at the bottom but the other one does not. And the reason why is, if I type it right, the reason why is because it will be at the bottom. It will always be at the bottom, and it will be marked as being deprecated. If I invoke the documentation, I can see that the key has been deprecated, and I can also see what the new key is. But there is also an intention, so Alt Enter, as you all know, and then it will offer me to switch to the new key, basically, and it will fix the configuration for me. The other thing that we added in 1.3, in Spring Boot 1.3, is more assistance for value discovery. So if I take the Hibernate DDL auto mode, I can see that now I get this really nice completion with value and documentation. And if I invoke the documentation here, I can also see the list of possible values. You can see that the type is string, so there is nothing where we could actually fetch those values, and these values are actually stored in the metadata, so in additional entries in the metadata, and you'll see that in a minute. In IntelliJ IDEA 15, we also automatically detect that an enum is the target type for a property, and we basically extract the values for you. So if you look, you basically get the same thing, except this is actually read from the code itself. So IntelliJ is inspecting your code, figuring out there is an enum, figuring out the value, fetching the documentation, and you get that automatically out of the box, and you get also this same nice list of values. There is also a better support for third-party configuration keys. So if I take Flyway, for instance, Flyway basically on migrate to say something, and I try to go to it. I don't have Flyway in my class path at the moment, so basically there's nothing, and there is no real information in the metadata about the documentation. But if I add Flyway to my project, and I go back, making sure it's imported first. I guess. Yes, it is now. Then I get also the original documentation on the setter itself, which will allow me to basically understand what that property does, even though there is no full description in the metadata. Right. So there is also a bunch of stuff that 14.1 did on its own, and so in intelligent reaction to certain types. And what we did, we used that experience to bundle that in the metadata format so that everybody can use it in a consistent way. First thing is class types. You can see that this new property is of type class, and it extends data source. So basically, if you do that, you get the list of matching classes. So the list of matching a class in your project that are an extension of data source. There is only one, which is the one I just added with Flyway, but I can also quickly add the GPA starter, which will bring Hibernate and GPA support. If I do that, there's plenty of things there. And only concrete classes are shown and not interface, which is good because if you have a lot of interface matching, this may pollute the list. The other type that we detect automatically in IntelliJ IDEA 15 is resource. So, for instance, banner location is a resource, so from the Spring resource abstraction. So I'm going maybe to remove that because I don't need to do that to run the app. So you all know about this wonderful Spring banner, right? So I'm going to customize it. So I'm going to create a new file, call it my banner.txt. I have a template for it, right? Then I'm going to ask Spring Boot to use it. And since it's a resource, IntelliJ will basically give me a list of things that match, and I can basically select it. And basically my app is using the banner now. So the point is any property that you define and you expose as a resource, you'll get automatically that kind of auto-completion, same thing for the other type. We also support now encoding automatically. So if your type is, sorry about that, if the type is charset, you automatically get auto-completion for that. You also get the same thing for MIME type. So if the type is MIME type, you get completion for that too. And finally, we also have some rules to basically to assist you about what kind of values you can provide. So for instance, if we take the max file size, you can see the documentation that you can indicate MB or KB for megabyte or kilobyte size respectively. So if you type something like that, it will show you that as a validation error. Okay, so these are all basically the nice assistance that you get on configuration keys exposed by Spring Boot. But maybe you don't know that, but it's very easy to add your own key, and it's very important to do so because at some point your application will need some customization. You will need to customize something, or you may, for instance, work on a library and you want to expose a set of keys to customize the way the library works. It's very important at the point that you also provide that same nice content assistance to your user. So let's see how we can create our own key and configure Spring Boot to generate the metadata automatically for you. I'm going to create a class, which is hello properties. I'm going to create a hello service, basically, that is configured with two keys. One is the prefix and one is the target, right? And I'm going to use that in a service just to show you how it works. So hello service. I'm going to make that a service. Taking the properties there, injecting, and I'm going to use a post contracts to just show a message, right? Something like, I'm going to take the prefix, a space, and the target. Okay, well, very simple. You can see that IntelliJ is figuring out that hello properties is actually not a bean. It's not a bean available in the context, which is right because there is nothing that tells it should be a scan or a bean should be created automatically. To enable that POJO to be processed by Spring Boot, there is an application, an annotation, sorry, that you can use, which is enable configuration properties, and you can provide the name of the class. You can have as many of those as you want. We will merge them and create the bean for you. Another alternative is to actually remove that line and put add components on that class and make sure that the class is picked up by component scanning, by class path scanning, of course. There are plenty of things that you can do. In this case, it's simple string, but you can have many complex types. So as we saw already, you can have a class, you can have a resource, you can have MIME type, charset, whatever. There is a constraint here to make sure that this value is set. It isn't for the moment, so let's do that. You can see that you have no assistance whatsoever. Well, and it's being shown as unknown. So if I restart the app, I have my, sorry about that, probably bigger would be a good idea at this point. You have the hello world message being printed here. Okay, so how can we make sure that those metadata are created automatically? Well, IntelliJ IDEA gives you a nice hint saying, hey, the annotation processor is not on the class path. So you can open the documentation, read the documentation, and you'll figure that out, that you have to add this. So let's do that. And once we've done that, let's rebuild. And if we rebuild, that file will be generated automatically for you. So let's see how it's not an unknown key now, and have my prefix with the documentation, like you would do for any Spring Boot key that you've seen so far. You can also jump to the code, etc. So it's very, very easy to create your own key, and it's very easy to integrate content assistance right in the IDE for your own keys. Okay, so what else can you do? What else can you do with the with those configuration keys? I showed you about the deprecated support, so I want to quickly demo how you can actually use that. Let's say that target was not the right name for it. So hello.target, we don't want that. That was the wrong name. We want to name it name instead, right? So we want to fix that. So let's add the getter and the setter so that we can actually inject the value from the environment. And since we have an API, we don't want to break existing users. So we're going to keep the same methods, not broke them, and just pass to the new name. But you need at some point to tell that this has been deprecated. So for that, there is an annotation you can use. You can give a reason, that was a lousy name, and the replacement. And the replacement is hello name. So if you do that, Spring Boot will detect the annotation, will update the metadata automatically. IntelliJ IDEA will read that, and it will tell you that it's deprecated now and why. And of course, you can also, like you see already, like you saw already for the Spring Boot config key, you can also do that for your own keys. Very quickly, there is also support for application YAML. So if I'm creating a YAML file instead, I guess I get the same experience. So let's say server.address to say something. And if I'm going here, I will get completion based on the path where I'm located. All right. So I want to show you a bit more stuff about more advanced use case, how you can basically provide list of values so that you get content assistance for the value as well. But before we do that, I want to create a custom key. So I want to, because of a corner case, something that you can't express with properties with a Pojo, but you still want content assistance, you can create the metadata manually if you want. So there is an inspection int that you can, so alt enter again, define configuration key foo counter, which is located. So you basically write that yourself, and basically IntelliJ will assist you. You get full auto completion everywhere. If the description is not right, you get some warning. You get also full auto completion for values, etc., etc. Okay. So if I go here, it's not unknown anymore, and I get basically the same content assistance. Right. So let's now give some value for the prefix. So we want to give a list of values for the prefix here. So to do that, I need to create additional metadata. I'm going to do that now. In a new section, something which is new in Spring Boot 1.3, which is hints. Again, you get full auto completion for that. So that's the hello name I want to change. I want to give it a list of values. And one value is, let's say, hi. And there is a description, which could be, I don't know, friendly style. And you can give it another value, which is hello, hello, and formal style to say something. Right. With that rebuilt, IntelliJ IDEA will pick that up and basically will give you a nice content assistance, like you had for the key. And I did a mistake. I took name instead of prefix. It's not really important, but let's just fix that to make sure that it's actually mean what I meant. Right. So we can go back with world and basically get content assistance for that new. Why do I have this? That's the demo effect, I guess. Interesting. Interesting. Anyway, right. So the other thing also you could do is you can have values provider. Values provider are a way to teach the IDE how it can collect values, potential values for a key. So one thing which is really, really nice is let's take our full. Let's quickly create another property here. So full bar, and let's say it's a string. So if I go here and I create a new entry for full bar, I can provide a provider, and in the list of provider, there's a few of them. So these are the options that you have with Spring Boot 1.3. We may add new ones in the future, but one which is interesting is Spring Bean reference. So Spring Bean reference, you're basically teaching the IDE that the value of the key is the name of the bean. So let's see that I want to, for some reason, I want to have the reference of a Spring Bean of type integer, just to make that easy. So I'm going to give it a target so that it doesn't return all the beans in the context, but just the ones that I'm interested in. And let's create a bunch of integer. Two actually, that'd be enough. Okay, so if I do that, and that was full bar, right? Then I get auto-completion for beans. If I type a bean that does not exist, it will be shown as an error because the editor did not find a bean, such bean with that name. Right, so plenty of stuff that you can do. Remember that the configuration key assistance is very nice, and it has been improved again. And you have new feature, these new features that are going to be released in Spring Boot 1.3, hopefully next week. You can already use them when you upgrade to IntelliJ 15. That's about me. That's it for me. So maybe Yann, to you now.
All right, thanks, Stéphane. On to the second part. We are going a bit more general, leaving the Spring Boot world and moving to Spring 4.2 support and a brand new thing in IntelliJ 15, which is the Spring model graph. So a quick recap on the next part. We are going to look at the new support for the add-bean annotation on default method, as well as method parameter auto-varying. We are going to look at the AliasFor annotation, which is a very nice way to extend the existing annotations in Spring. And then we are going to look at the application event support, which was added in IntelliJ 15. And the second big topic is the Spring Model Dependencies graph, which is a very nice way to understand, visualize, and hopefully fix some setup errors with regard to your Spring configuration, especially for bigger projects. And the last topic I want to talk about today is our plans for the coming things with regard to Spring support in IntelliJ IDEA 15.1. Okay, let's get started with Spring Framework.4. So, the first thing I want to show in this class is the support for the add-bean annotation on default methods and interfaces. Default methods have been added in Java 8. So, a quick recap: you can define basically default implementations of an interface in the interface itself. So basically a little bit like an abstract class with a default implementation, which you can override in inheritors, but here on interfaces. we have a service of the class order service, which is declared in this method order service, and it's annotated with @bean. And so if we inherit this interface, our configuration will also inherit this bean definition. Let's take a look at our configuration. So we have my config here. It implements order service config. We have field service with the given type, which we are expecting, trying to auto-wire it. And if we go on the editor gutter icon, we can navigate to the auto-wired instance of the service. And when I click here, I get actually transferred to the defining bean definition, which is the inherited interface. Back to our configuration. The next thing with regard to @bean support is supporting it in method parameters. So we have here a little demonstration purpose only wrapping of the original order service, which we pass in the order service parameter of this method. And we return this instance here in another instance of the bean. As you can see, we expect the original instance of the order service to be provided. And again, I can click here on the gutter icon and see that it's correctly resolved in IntelliJ, and we can verify that our code is correct here. All right, of course, we can also override the default bean we inherited from order service config interface. So let's just do that and override the bean definition. And maybe we want to provide a custom order service, which basically is just a fake implementation of the existing order service, just for demonstration purposes. And yeah, we can see that the bean is now set up correctly here as well. Okay, on to the next topic, which is the support for AliasFor. AliasFor is a new annotation from the Spring framework, which allows you to redefine existing annotation parameters from the built-in Spring annotations. So what did I do here? We define our own annotation called myScanner. It inherits from the component scan annotation from the Spring framework. We must make sure to add the retention annotation to our own element, otherwise it won't be stored in the class, and it cannot be used at runtime by the Spring framework. And here we make use of the AliasFor annotation. So basically what we can do is to redefine existing attributes from the inheriting annotation, in this case the component scan class, and we can rename, for example, the base packages attribute here. I renamed it to scanned. And of course, IntelliJ provides auto completion here as well, filtered by the corresponding types from the parent annotation. And of course, you can control click here and go to the original definition from the inherited annotation as well. So that's a nice way to create your own custom annotations, inheriting from the default Spring annotations. You can redefine attributes. You can add your own attributes, which is especially interesting for all right, test. Okay, we are sorry, we are streaming live from a conference and we have some Wi-Fi problems, it seems, so let's hope it stays stable. Okay, back to the AliasFor annotation. This is especially useful for your own annotations when you're writing integration tests and you need to define some special attributes for your integration tests. This is also supported in IntelliJ 15 now. So let's take a look at our custom testing annotation, which is basically a meta annotation of the default add context configuration annotation provided by the Spring testing framework. Again, I'm overriding here one of the existing attributes, in this case the classes attribute, and I just redefine it with my own name, and I can add my own attributes or whatever I think is necessary for my tests. Of course, this is also supported in the actual test model. So here I have a small unit test to run my order service test, and the dependency resolution and the bean icons are, of course, as well properly detected here in my test model. All right, that's all about the meta annotations and the add AliasFor annotation support in IntelliJ 15. So the next big topic is the support for application events, which is a very nice way to send and receive events or basically messages within your Spring application. And let's take a look at that. So we have this order service, which basically takes an order ID and an order status of confirmed or unconfirmed and creates an order event bean, which is then published via the publisher instance field, which is an application event publisher, which is provided by Spring. This order event can just be an ordinary POJO bean, or we can also inherit from the base class for application events and add our own attributes. We have this source attribute here, which is basically defining the origin of the event. So all we do here is just store those attributes here. And now let's take a look at this nice little icon here next to the publish event invocation. This is the new support for application events here in IntelliJ. So I can now navigate to the corresponding event listeners. And apparently there are a few. So let's take a look at the easiest one, which is this one here. Any event listener just needs to be annotated with the event listener annotation, and you can pass in a parameter of the expected event type. So when we run this application, we will actually send an order event, and we will just print out the order ID here. And we also support navigating back to the origin sender. So I can again click here on the gutter icon and get back to any event sender. Let's take a look at the other implementations we have here as listeners. So let's go to the order event processor, which is a bit more sophisticated. Again, we have the event listener annotation, but here we find a new attribute called condition. So condition is basically just a Spring EL expression, which you can add to your method definition, and it allows you to filter events which will actually be passed onto this method here. We have autocompletion here for the parameter, for all the available beans, for example. And as you can see here, the order event we pass in is also in the autocompletion list. And of course, since we know this type of the parameter, we also get autocompletion for all the attributes of this event. Again, we can invoke quick documentation. We can also navigate there, and all the usual features of IntelliJ work in this context as well. So those two methods actually process different orders. We have one event listener processing all confirmed orders, and then we have one event listener processing only special orders. And special orders are just defined by this little Spring EL expression, which checks the order ID for the magic 42 ID. So let's just quickly run our main class. which is basically just a minimal setup to instantiate the order service and our application context. And here we will publish one of those events, order events. And when I run this, our event listeners will trigger, and we see nothing because it's a demo. Okay, usually we should get the system out. It worked before. Okay, so much about the application events support, and now let's go to the Spring Model Dependencies graph. Let's switch to a different project here. So what is the Spring Model Dependencies graph? You probably already know the existing graph for Spring Beans, where you can see all the beans, all the relationships between beans, for example, auto-wired relationships or component scan relationships. And in IntelliJ 15, we introduced a new diagram type, which will not show the beans, but the underlying configuration files and their relationships. So usually in bigger Spring applications, you will have not only one Spring configuration file or class, but many of them. And usually they will have quite a few relationships between them. Sometimes they are not very easy to understand, using add import, for example, or using some kind of star import to match a certain set of files, for example, or using component scan to reach into other configurations on the class bus. And that's something which is really hard to understand, especially if you are entering a new project, or maybe if you want to refactor an existing Spring configuration and you need to understand why some things are not working as you expect them to work. So this project is just a very artificial project containing a huge list of Java configuration classes here, just normal configuration classes without any beans, and a huge list of XML configuration files, which in turn contain other configuration setups like component scans and imports. So when I invoke this Spring Model Dependencies graph now on the diagrams menu, I will actually see the resulting graph of all the configuration files. So on the very left side, we have our module. Then we have our Spring file sets, which are defined in the Spring facet. And then we have those main nodes, basically, which are defined in the Spring file set. So let's just quickly put this here aside. So that's basically the top level group of configuration files. But as you can see, when we move further to the right, there are many more configuration files which we do not see in the Spring facet configuration. And those are exactly the files which are imported or component scanned, or whatever other mechanism we support for detecting. And we see those edges here, which are color-coded, telling us, for example, here we have a component scan on this node from bxml to the config e class. And so it's very easy to understand where this configuration class is actually coming from. And of course, you can navigate to any of those nodes here and see what they're actually doing. And we can also go to any of those nodes and see the defining configuration element, in this case, component scan. Let me show you another example of this Spring configuration graph, going back to the world of Spring Boot. As you might know, in Spring Boot, there's a lot of, some would call it magic involved in the auto configuration of Spring Boot. So what happens behind the scenes is that Spring Boot comes with a huge list of auto configuration classes for all the frameworks and technologies it supports. And those auto configuration classes are automatically processed by Spring Boot, and they work on several conditions, for example, presence or non-presence of certain classes in the class path, your application being a web application or not, and many other things. And then basically set up some kind of default configuration, which is the key to productivity in Spring Boot, or one of the keys. And actually, it would be interesting to see what this auto configuration looks like at runtime. And you can do this here. So what I have prepared here is a very artificial Spring Boot project using the latest Spring Boot 1.3 snapshot, actually. And on the Spring Starter wizard, I just checked all the dependencies which are available. So that's a very artificial project, but just to get as many nodes as possible. And when we take a look at the Spring model dependencies graph, sorry, wrong node, I must click here. Then it doesn't look too interesting, because right now what we see here is just the setup we have in our own project. So we only have our main class, and that points to the add Spring Boot application, the normal Spring Boot application class annotation. It becomes more interesting when we enable showing nodes defined, configuration nodes defined in libraries. So this is actually the graph of all the auto configuration classes which are detected by IntelliJ and also processed, by the way. So let's take a quicker look. And you can see there's a huge list of auto configuration classes triggered by the Spring Boot application, which in turn trigger another set of other configurations or import other configurations. So that's all the magic that is happening in Spring Boot behind the scenes, which you usually don't see, but that's a nice way to visualize what is happening with all the auto configuration, and also a great way to debug. Maybe if you don't want to rely on the information you can get on the console from Spring Boot itself, if there's some error in your auto configuration and things are not working as you expect them to be. We have a few plans with the Spring Model Dependencies graph as well. So we are thinking to use it as a possible entry point for Spring Model setup related refactorings, actually, because we now have all this information on how those configuration files are related to each other. And there are some interesting things we hope to come up with in the future. This brings me to my last small bit I want to talk about today. That's the plans we have for Spring support in the next version of IntelliJ 15.1. So to stay just at this topic for auto configuration, as you can see, the graph is quite complex already. We do support auto configuration models, so Spring Boot plugin support in IntelliJ does scan the auto configuration files and acts on the conditionals which are defined on those. It doesn't work on all of those yet, but we try to achieve the 80 to 90% case working for IntelliJ 15.1, so that for most auto configurations or for most projects, you will get the actual bean model as it will be at runtime, just as if Spring Boot would process all those auto configuration classes for you. Another area of improvement is the application.yml editor support. There are a few missing bits here and there which we want to fix up for 15.1. The last topic for Spring Boot in this area is further improvements to the run configuration, tighter integration with the Spring Boot 1.3 dev tools, which is a very nice way to provide a hot reload of your application classes while developing your Spring Boot application. Going more general to the other Spring topics, we plan to update the existing support for Spring Data, Spring Security, and Spring Integration, bring them up to the latest GA releases of Spring, and find out the few missing bits and pieces which have been added there. Of course, another big topic is cloud integration or support for cloud technology in the IDE. So we will try to rework our existing integration and also make a stronger connection between running Spring Boot and running Spring Boot applications on the cloud, and further improvements in that area are definitely planned. And the last big topic for 15.1 is to improve the support for Spring MVC, the web framework from Spring, to enable most of the possibilities you have to configure Spring MVC via annotation support. So that's all from me. I hope there was some interesting stuff for you to see, and now we'll switch to questions if you have any.
I want to thank our presenters for joining us. A great presentation. Make sure to also check our website and of course send us your feedback to let us know how we did it today and any suggestions you have. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.